All right, so this is the first of a few talks on the generalities of nutrition and how you can just basically nail down the parts that are really important and how to determine what's important and what's not important and to make sure that you're really focusing on the things that are actually going to make a difference to what you're trying to achieve. So today we're going to look at the two most fundamental or the two most important factors when it comes to any diet or any nutrition plan or any approach, and that's your calories, your energy intake, and the habits that you form around that. In following talks, I'm going to discuss protein, fats, carbohydrate intake, micronutrient intake, and then just some generalities around nutrition that are actually of importance with supplementation and stuff like that. But if you don't watch any of those talks and you only watch this talk and take in what's in this talk, you'll be miles ahead of where you were beforehand, and you'll be miles ahead of most people. Nutrition is definitely something that a lot of people really overcomplicate and try to make more nuanced and more detailed than it needs to be. The actual important building blocks that make up a solid nutrition approach are actually very easy to understand. They're easy to implement. Where the difficulty lies is the consistency of that approach and knowing that you are flawed and knowing that you underestimate things and knowing that you aren't accurate in your reporting, because humans aren't objective as creatures. We're very fallible, and as thus you need to be mindful of that when you set out any approach. So that's we're going to spend the second half of this talk discussing that, but the first half we're actually going to get down to calorie intake. So we're going to make some assumptions around this. So I'm going to assume that you know what a calorie is, you're familiar with it. What we see is a lot of people will think that the problem with nutrition or the problem with dietary approach in general is a lack of understanding or a lack of education. But certainly within the United Kingdom or the USA or Europe, Western Europe, it's not really a lack of knowledge. Really, for a lot of people will be aware of the concepts that we're going to talk about. Maybe not in a hell of a lot of detail, but they'll be aware of the broad strokes. Where it falls down is the application of it, the adherence to it. That's where the real gap is between success and failure when it comes to a nutrition approach. So calories, is a unit of measurement. It is the amount of energy in a food or the amount of energy that you burn in activity. And I think we all know that. It's by far the most important factor when it comes to any nutrition plan. So if you want to lose weight, you want to gain weight, or you want to eat for maintenance or eat for performance, calories are probably going to be the single biggest lever you can utilize to determine the success or the failure of that approach. For example, if you're trying to gain weight and you're eating 500 calories a day, it doesn't matter what those 500 calories are made up of. It doesn't matter what the structure of those 500 calories is when you eat them, what they're made of. If you aren't eating sufficient calories or you aren't eating a calorie amount that are in line with your goal, you are completely wasting your fucking time. So we need to get this in line first and foremost. To understand what actually are in, like what calories are in different foods and what it actually means to eat a net surplus or to eat maintenance or to eat a deficit, what that feels like, we need to make sure that you're actually doing that. And to do that, means you need to track for a period of time. I'm personally not big for tracking or tracking all the time because I just don't stick at it, but I have done it in the past and I do have a bit of an understanding, as in like how much calories are in this amount of chicken, how much calories are within this amount of rice. But just like anyone else, I am fallible and I get it wrong more times than I get it right. But I've went through periods where I have been very structured. I was eating the same thing. I eat the same things every day, literally the same things every day. I eat at the same times every day. I literally, when I started when I first started lifting and first started getting into nutrition, I used to have an alarm that was set for every 3 hours. And when the alarm went off, it was like just a vibration alarm on my phone in my pocket. As soon as that went off, I went and ate. Like whatever I was doing, if I was at work, I would have a protein shake available or I'd have something on hand. But literally, when that vibration went off, I went and ate. And that created a trigger that gave me structure. And that probably, regardless of what I was eating, what I wasn't eating, that was probably the most successful thing I did when I first started. It was I created that habit where I had a trigger and then an action on that trigger. So I had a vibration going off in my pocket, and then I would go and eat. And it actually got to the point where I didn't actually need the phone anymore because I would just get hungry every 3 hours because I was conditioned to do it. So you need to track, and you need to actually go through that process of learning what calories, learning what nutrition is in your food, and then matching that up against kind of tracking your body weight and stuff. So we'll go into this later in the talk, but there needs to be a period of learning, a period of understanding, and a period where you try and put away preconceived notions you might have about what are healthy foods, what are unhealthy foods, what's a good diet, what's a bad diet, and just experiment a little bit and be a bit more open to trying stuff, and just kind of put your preconceived notions at the door and actually enter into more of like a learning mindset with it. You don't know how much calories you take day-to-day basis. People underreport the amount they eat, and they over-report the amount they burn. Is a very well-established phenomenon. It's very well established in nutrition and social sciences that this is a fact. People aren't accurate at guessing or reporting what they've eaten or reporting what they've burned. So you're going to be wrong. Like, chances are you're going to be wrong, unless you've been diligent and went through a process to try and reduce the likelihood of you being wrong. But even then, you're probably still going to be wrong. You're probably still not going to be accurate. So you need to drop whatever preconceived notion you have at the door, that you know what you need to eat, and you know what a calorie is, and you know what protein is, unless you actually went through a rigorous process. But if you already done that, you probably won't be watching this video. So have an open mind, basically. When it comes to calorie, it's the net amount. So it's your daily, weekly, and monthly intake. You can have low days, you can have medium days, you can do intermittent fasting, you can eat 6 days per week. You can do that's what I did, 6 days a week, 6 meals a week, every 3 hours, just because literally what I read on T Nation is what I did. But I've done intermittent fasting. It works. At the minute, I just have like 4 meals a day. It works. I mean, it doesn't actually fucking matter. What matters is your net consumption of calories and it lining up with your target. So if you're trying to lose weight, you need a net deficit. You need to eat less calories than you need to consume less calories than you burn. If you want to gain weight, you've got to eat a net surplus. You've got to eat more calories than you burn. And if you want to stay at maintenance, maybe you want to recomp, or maybe you want to focus on performance, you've got to know what maintenance is and what that actually looks like in a diet. So regardless of your goal, if this is not a process you went through, you haven't done the whole tracking of foods, you haven't done food diaries, you haven't went through learning what's in different food types, this is a process you have to go through if you want to take control of your nutrition and have it work for you, what you want to do. This is the most important step, is learning this shit. So we're just going to go through the 3 different goals you probably have when it comes to calorie intake and what that looks like. So first one's definitely the most popular, which is losing fat. So there's an important thing to change the way you think about it, or change the way you target it. The goal is to lose fat, not to lose weight. So if I look at a scale, so for instance, we're going to talk about monitoring scale weight and other factors. You might monitor scale weight and actually find that it goes up, depending on kind of what your training's like, depending on what your diet's like, it is very possible to gain weight, but to lose fat. If you've never done weight training before, and then all of a sudden you decide that you're going to lift 5 days a week, you're going to try and get as strong as you can, you're consistent with it, you're diligent with it, and for the first time in your life, you're following a nutrition approach that's structured, you're eating an appropriate protein intake for your goals, you can lose body fat and gain muscle mass and gain net weight. It happens. And it doesn't just happen in noobs. It happens in advanced and elite level people as well. I've seen it happen with elite level athletes. You know, people have like 80 plus test caps. It does happen. You don't have to be on steroids either. It can happen. So it's important that when we monitor, we're monitoring a more of a global sense, so we have an idea of what's actually going on. We won't know to the most minute detail what's going on, but if we're looking at a basket of variables rather than just looking at scale weight, we'll be in a much better place to actually tweeze out what's happening. You need to consider for weight loss, you need to, first of all, make sure you're in a net deficit. You need to consider appetite suppression and habits. So like eating more regularly isn't probably more important if you're trying to lose weight. Having more voluminous foods, eating a lot of fruit, a lot of veg, spinach, broccoli, food content is kind of more water than actual food. More voluminous foods, low calorie foods that are voluminous. That's an important tactic you can utilize. Even if, for example, even if you're not trying to like have a high protein intake, a protein shake with water, so one scoop, 25-gram scoop with water is 100 calories, but it'll stop you being hungry for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So it could, that's a tactic you could utilize in a weight loss diet to keep you going from breakfast to lunch to dinner, to stop you from self-sabotaging and eating more the next meal than you probably would have done, or snacking on something that's not planned, that's high calorie. So that's something you need to think about when it comes to calories and weight loss. You need to monitor your own body weight, take measurements. Pictures are important, and it needs to work with your own psychology. So, for example, some people will fixate on scale weight, and it'll be a super negative thing for them to do on a daily basis. So someone like that might weigh themselves once a week. They might weigh themselves once a month. They might not weigh themselves. They might actually just take photos and maybe keep a log of consistency, maybe log consistency rather than logging a scale weight. You need to have something that's going to work for your own psychology and something that's going to actually be sustainable, something you stick with. The plan you stick with is infinitely better than the plan you don't stick with. It's not the quality of the plan that's important. It's your ability to stick with it, to be consistent. So it needs to be realistic. You've got the structure and the consistency. This is way more important than the diet. It doesn't, like, honestly, like we spoke about beforehand, it doesn't matter if it's intermittent fasting. It doesn't matter if it can be anything. It literally doesn't matter. You can do low carb, low fat. You can do vegan. You can do vegetarian. Like it honestly does not matter. What matters is that you fucking stick to it and you continue to stick to it. You should be looking at a slow, steady loss. So people utilize like a percentage target. I personally prefer just having like an appropriate target. So for someone my size, I'm like 115, 116 kilos, like 500 grams a week is a good amount. For someone who's smaller, like a smaller guy or a lady who's maybe like 70, 80, 90 kilos, 250, 300 grams is a bit more realistic. Or if you're someone that's like a lot smaller, like 60 kilos, then 150, 200 grams. It just needs to be you need to set a target that's realistic and it's sustainable. So I'm not trying to lose 3 kilos a week, unless you're really big, in which case that might be sustainable. But it falls in line with what's realistic and sustainable for your own situation. And sustainability is the goal. You've got to be able to do it long term. Nutrition, diet interventions are all they're 24/7. So it's got to be sustainable. You can't do on like detoxes and shit like that are a complete waste of time. There's no point even starting on that shit. If you're trying to gain muscle, so you got to be in a net surplus. Basically, it's just a mirror of weight loss. So you need to consider how to make sure you got sufficient appetite. Some people habitually will undereat, and they tend to be smaller, and some people habitually overeat and they tend to be bigger. It's all down to like the day to day. There are genetic factors that shit in play, but at the end of the day, it's what you do on a day to day basis. If on a day to day basis you're eating too much, you're gonna get fat. If on a day to day basis you're not eating enough, you're probably gonna be skinny. So, I mean, again, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. You have within the bodybuilding circles, you have that kind of habitual hard gainer who's a skinny guy who's trying to gain weight and he just can't gain weight. And the typical meme is just eat more, bro. Well, guess what? It's a meme because it's actually fucking true. Most guys who are skinny and quote unquote can't gain weight, you're just not eating enough. It's literally that fucking simple. As much as you might plead otherwise, it is literally that simple. Protein content is probably less important for you. So I probably didn't discuss in the previous slide protein content for weight loss. So because we're trying to lose fat, or we would be trying to lose fat and preserve muscle mass, you actually probably want a higher protein content when you're in a calorie deficit than when you're in a calorie surplus. When we're in a position where when we're in a calorie surplus, we're probably going to have sufficient carbohydrate. We're going to be in calorie surplus. So that kind of diet is a lot more muscle sparing in nature. So therefore the protein content, as long as it's within like a pretty good level. So we'll get into it more when we talk about kind of macronutrients, but between like 1.4 grams to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, if you're in that space, you're pretty much good. And if you're bulking or you're trying to get bigger, being at the lower end is fine. 1.4 grams, absolutely fine. It's going to be sufficient for what you require. Whereas if you're in a calorie deficit, you actually want to be higher in that band, or even higher, maybe like 2.5 or 3 grams per kilogram, just because it has a muscle sparing effect, which is something that you want to preserve when you're in calorie deficit. Again, you got to monitor your weight, you got to take measurements, you got to take pictures. And again, it's got to work for your own psychology. So if you're the kind of guy who's trying to gain weight and you step on the scale day to day and it's not budging and you freak out and you get disparaged with it, then just forget about it. Don't weigh yourself every week or every day. Weigh yourself every week, weigh yourself every month, take pictures, focus on the weight in the gym that you're shifting, and focus on your strength, focus on the process. Again, I think it would probably be more productive for a lot of people to have like an activity monitor or a consistency monitor where you just tick a box, right? I ate breakfast, I ate my snack, I ate lunch, I ate dinner, and do that rather than monitoring the scale weight or monitoring a measurement or monitoring pictures. Like, they are important to have. But if you're to choose between that and just something that's going to keep you consistent, doing the thing that keeps you consistent is what's going to be what makes you successful, regardless of what your goal is. And again, structured consistency is way more important than what you're eating. Like we said, you want to target a slow and steady gain with this kind of approach. You're looking to gain 100 to 250 grams per week. Typically, you can't put on muscle fast. Even if you're using steroids, the amount of muscle you can put on is limited. You're not going to put on like 10 kilos of muscle in a month. Like, it's just not going to happen. As a natural, you might put on like a few kilos in a year if you're new. So it should be a slow and steady gain. We're not trying to go from a 130 pound weakling to a 220 pound mass mutant in 3 weeks. It's not happening. So it's got to be sustainable. So the main target should be to gain strength, to gain weight slowly and consistency. So we are limiting fat gain. Now, fat gain in a bulking process isn't really that big. Just the same way that like a bit of muscle loss in a fat loss diet is okay. It's not the end of the world. A bit of fat gain if you're trying to get bigger isn't the end of the world. We can always lose fat. It's not an issue. Once you've done this and you understand it and you know how to pull the levers and you know what works for your psychology, it's actually not that difficult to gain or lose weight. It's actually quite easy. What's difficult is if you haven't done it before and you don't have habits and you haven't developed it, you don't have a certain understandings. The difficulty is getting to that place, and that's where most people fall down, is they don't spend the time to build up the habits, to build up the knowledge, to build up the experience of to do what's required when it comes to gaining or losing or maintaining. And that's kind of what we're gonna focus on is, or what are those habits? What are those things you need to pay attention to, and just to forget about the rest of it because it doesn't matter. If we're eating for performance or maintenance, we've got to be in net maintenance over the week, over the month, over the year. Calories need to support training goals. So if I've got a super heavy deadlift session coming up, it's no good being in like a 50% calorie surplus the day beforehand and coming into a training session with like no food. So I'm going to have a shit session. I need to make sure that I've got the calories in my week where I need them to try and support my training goals, to try and support what I'm trying to achieve. For an example of this could be training days being higher in calories and carbohydrate, and rest days being lower in carbohydrate and a slightly lower in calories, because I don't really need the calories or need the protein. I'll probably need the protein, but I don't need the carbohydrate, and I don't really need the calories as much on a rest day. If I was, for example, if I'm doing a double day, I might up the calories on that day, and then I have maybe a single or a lighter session the next day. I might have a smaller calorie intake, and then a rest day, and another smaller again, another smaller again. If I have a double day, I'm gonna have to consider about eating more carbohydrate in between sessions to replenish muscle glycogen. These are factors that your structure and your habits should be built around supporting your sessions and aiding in your recovery. And there needs to be an element of that, whether you're trying to gain weight or you're trying to lose weight. But if you're trying to focus on performance, those are important levers you need to operate in the diet. So we're just going to talk around some more granular things now. So first of all, I've mentioned before, you need to track and understanding what's in your food. So for example, what is this table? Have you seen it before? Within the UK, this is on every single bit of food you buy for the most part. So certainly from a supermarket. So if you buy 500 grams of chicken, 300 grams of chickpeas, this information is there, and it's been there the entire time. There's been a drive in the last 10, 15 years to have it more apparent, to have it put on front where we even have like traffic light systems and all kinds of bullshit. This information will be here the whole time. It's by 100. Normally it's done by serving, but it has to by law be done by 100 grams or 100 mils. So if there's a packet of 500 grams of chicken, you'll know what the carbohydrate content of that is, the protein content, sodium content, normally what that fat's made up of, monosaturated, polysaturated, saturated, the energy content. So, and it's normally given in kilojoules and calories. So that you need just start reading. When you go to the supermarket, pick up a bit of food you're going to buy and read this bit of information. Start comparing what's calorie content in something like granola, for example, just super high in calories, and is normally termed as a healthy food, versus something like white rice, which is actually fairly low in calorie content, certainly comparably anyway, which is maybe termed as like less healthy choice. You need to just build up an awareness of what that actually what the content of food is, and a really good app to track with is MyFitnessPal. It's just it's easiest to use. You can scan shit, you can put it in. It doesn't matter. You can use pen and paper. You can journal it online. You can hire a nutrition coach to do it with you. You can do it yourself. You can do it on MyFitnessPal. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you fucking do it. and then you build up an understanding of what actually is in food. So you start to have more of an awareness of what the calorie content of meals are, what the protein content of meals are, what the carbohydrate content is, what the fat content is, and the whole nine. But it's just building up that awareness. It's not, you don't need to have a PhD in nutrition to read the fucking table and to times it by. So if it's 100 grams and it's a 500-gram serving, times that shit by 5 and you know what the calorie content is. It was not 100% accurate, but it's more accurate than not knowing. First thing, so once we go into this, you need to understand how much you need to eat. So if I'm trying to gain weight, lose weight, or maintain, I need to understand what maintenance is and then what my deviance from maintenance is. So on the left here, we have what's known as your basic metabolic rate, and this is the BMR equation you can use to determine that. So this is basically based off your sex, your age, your height. You can determine how much food, how much calories you would need to maintain your body weight if you're to do fuck all. If you're to lie in bed, that's the amount of calories you would need to stay the same weight. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. If you're to lie in bed, you'd lose muscle mass, blah blah blah. But it's just a starting point. What these two charts are going to give you is a starting point, and then we use the processes that we're going to talk about to deviate from that starting point, to upregulate, downregulate, to kind of change what we're doing. But it will give you a fairly accurate place to start from. So once you've used that equation to work out your basic metabolic rate or your maintenance at rest, then we use a Harris-Benedict, and it's just an activity multiplier. So it goes from very light activity, which is more or less sedentary, to strenuous. So like being a professional rugby player, you basically take that number and times it. So if you're an office worker and your hobbies are gaming, you're going to take that number and times it by 1.1. And if you're Mo Farah, you're going to take that number and times it by 1.7 or more. So that your calorie intake is more aligned with what you actually do on a day-to-day basis, and it's more realistic for what it is you're trying to achieve. So the next thing is to monitor and adapt. So once I have that number, let's say it's 2,500, and then I'm like, right, okay, I want to lose weight. I might minus 250 calories or minus 500 calories off it. If it's to gain weight and the number is 2,500, I might add 250 or add 500 calories to it. Or if it's to maintain, I'll just take that number and try and hit that number. And then how I hit that number, how many meals and stuff, is going to depend on your schedule and depend on what you decide to go with. That's down to you to determine. But the equations are just based off normative data. They're taken from sample sizes. They're not going to be accurate to you as an individual, but they will be accurate within a tolerance. It's better than just saying, oh man, need to. So for example, on that topic, if you look at or if you read the nutrition information on food within the United Kingdom, you'll see that the recommended calorie intake for men is for 2,500 and the recommended calorie intake for women is 2,000. That's based off like an 80 kilo guy and like a 60 kilo woman. I can't remember specifically, but it's basically the BMR for those people. But I'm not an 80 kilo dude. I'm 117 kilo guy who walks like 20,000 steps a day and trains with weights 6 days a week. So my intake, that's not relevant for me. You could be a 48 kilo girl. You could be a 130 kilo girl. You could be a 160 kilo super heavyweight. It's not going to be relevant for you. So for it to be relevant for you, you need to use those equations to come up with some kind of good, decent ballpark figure to start with. But we accept that it's an approximation. It's a relatively accurate approximation is what it is. And then once I have a calorie target, I'm sticking to it, then I need to monitor. So for me, what I personally do, or what I would personally do if this is a process I was actively pursuing, I weigh myself every morning after I went to the toilet. I don't wear any clothes when I do it, so I'm in the nud, and that's the only body weight measurement I would pay any credence to. After you've had some water and you had your first meal, or you went about your day, it's then a really variable measure. So if you're gonna weigh yourself in the morning before you've eaten anything, and preferably after you went to the toilet, and you'll get a stable and accurate measure if you do it that way. If you have some way of measuring your body fat percentage that's like consistent, it doesn't even necessarily have to be accurate, it just has to be consistent. So if you're using like bioelectrical impedance, so like you hold a thing or you stand on scales and it gives you a percentage, you can use that as an indicator. It's not that accurate. I wouldn't personally use it, but it is something you can utilize if you have something. I'm sure it's advanced a fair amount from when I was in university. Caliper, if someone who can measure calipers, that's super accurate. It's like I got like a 3% tolerance. Do you have someone that knows what they're doing? Someone who's ISKA accredited, or even better, if you have access to like a DEXA scan or a body pod, you can utilize that because they're accurate. I'm sorry, you probably don't. You want to monitor your daily steps just as a general measure of activity levels. Taking pictures in the same room with the same lighting is pretty good way of seeing kind of what it looks like, and then measurements. So if you're talking about like a frequency, body weight either daily, weekly, or monthly, depending on what you want to do. It might, like as previously discussed, it might be something you don't even want to do, which is totally cool. Like you need to do something that works for you and your own psychology. If it's going to give you anxiety and hang-ups doing it, don't fucking do it. Do something else. Body fat percentage, yeah, kind of like on a 4-weekly, 8-weekly sort of. If you're using an accurate measure, probably something I would sack. But if you're using biological impedance, you're probably doing it when you're weighing yourself anyway. So you can take a note of that if you want. Take a note of that if you want. It's not something I would personally put much credence into. Daily steps, daily. Do it on your phone. Do it on your Fitbit. Pictures probably bi-weekly or every 4 weeks. Some people do it weekly. It depends again. What are you going to stick to? If your coach wants you to do weekly check-ins with pictures, sweet, do it. And then measurements again, kind of bi-weekly. Measurements are good because they, for example, so we talked about, you could be putting on scale weight, but if you're keeping a measure of your min max or your min max and your waist max and your waist min, if those are dropping and your weight's going up, sweet, you're putting on your muscle mass. The same token, if your weight's going up, and your scale weight's going up, but those measures are going up like fuck, then you can be pretty sure that what you're putting on is fat. So you want to course correct. And then just a couple of things to talk about. The kind of like the fluctuations there in there out. What we're looking for is we're looking for a trend. So above, you can see a trend line and a daily weigh-in from a precision nutrition slide, or you can see below we have a moving average based off the movements of a stock or a share or an equity. What we're looking at is at the moving average. So the average from the last 7 measures, 14 measures, 21 measures, or we're looking for a trend line, and we're looking for that to trend in the right direction. So if I'm trying to gain weight, I want to trend up. If I'm trying to maintain, I want to see like a trend that's like more or less flat. Or if I'm trying to lose weight, I want to see a downward trend, or a moving average that represents what I want to see. And I'm paying attention to the trend. The individual data points, I'm not necessarily too worried about. So I'm not really paying attention to those so much. Just to kind of back up a little bit what I was saying about you need to eat more or less. You can search for it yourself. I've got one abstract here with the link to it. But basically, it's fairly well understood and well reported that people underreport the calories they consume and they overestimate the calories they burn. I mean, it's fairly well demonstrated. It's not something, you don't need to take my word for it. You can go research it yourself, but it's just something to be cognition of when we're addressing a subject or a topic like this that is with us day in, day out all the time, and we are really quite invested in it. It's a big thing. It makes up a big part of our ego, and ego is something that we protect like fuck. So don't assume you're right. Don't assume you know what you're doing. Assume the opposite and take it from there. So once we're kind of talked around kind of calories and the intakes and kind of how to set levels and how to adjust it, we're just going to kind of now talk around habit forming, which is probably by far the most important thing you'll do. So if you were to take away fuck all from this lecture or this lecture series or these slides or what the fuck you want to call it, if you just do this shit, you're pretty much going to hit like 80-90% of your target easily. Like I said beforehand, like that is with us 24/7, so we need to work with that. We can't have an overly restrictive plan that we're not going to stick with because it's a waste of fucking time. We need to have a plan that's going to work for us as an individual and our circumstance. You know, you can't be going, Joe Rogan does intermittent fasting. Joe Rogan's a fucking millionaire who runs a podcast once a day. Everything's in his house. Like, that guy's got his own lifestyle. If you're a mother of 12 who's working like shift patterns, that's just not going to work for you. You're going to need to find something that's going to work for you and your situation. So just forget about what other people do and just think about actually, you know, what's my day-to-day look like? What's my situation? What am I like as a person? What am I going to stick to? What am I not going to stick to? And come up with something that's going to work for that. Because if you try and work against who you are as a person and work against your own situation, you will fucking fail. There's no ifs or buts about this. If you try and swim against the tide, you're not going to get very far. So swim with the fucking tide, or change the tide. But that's it. That's a bigger conversation. You need to stick to the plan. It's basically that simple. Once we've set out, once we've like decided what's feasible, once we've put together a plan that is feasible, you need to stick with it. You know, I mean, if you're sitting here 12 weeks down the line and you're like, well, this didn't work because you didn't stick with it, whose fucking fault's that? Ultimately, it's all down to you. Like, you can watch videos like this, you can hire a coach, you can go to a lecture, you can get a PhD in nutrition, you can fucking do what you want. But if you're not going to stick with a plan, you're not going to stick with something, it's not going to fucking work. So you need to stick with it. I mean, it's that simple. That's why it's got to be sustainable. It's got to be something that works for you and your situation. And there's no point trying to take up a plan or take up an approach that doesn't do that, because it won't work. A really good book to read is called Atomic Habits, and I'll talk a lot around habits, triggers, and being consistent. A fantastic read, definitely well worth it. I think you're much better focusing on habits, habit formation, and an approach that's sustainable and you're going to be consistent with. If you nail that down, the rest are going to take care of itself, really, because, you know, eating a certain amount of calories, eating a certain amount of protein, eating kinds of foods, that's all easy shit. We can all do that. But sticking to a plan and sticking to being consistent, that is not easy. So that's where you need to kind of spend your effort. My thoughts anyway. Then it's sustainable. We talked about rapid change, rapid gain, rapid loss is a fucking awful idea. If you're eating like, so an example, I've done the what's called the velocity diet. It's fucking absolutely retarded. It's basically you survive off protein shakes. So I was having like, I can't remember, it's like 1,800 calories, 2,000 calories, 100% through protein shakes. Absolutely horrendous. I went from like 104 to like 88 kilos in 3 weeks, and my bench took a shit. My squat, like, basically I went from being in relatively good shape, fairly strong, fairly fit. I was a little bit pudgy, but not too bad, to being kind of lean but weak as fuck. I did it twice, and it was good. It was probably better from a mental standpoint as a challenge. As a diet, it was an absolute fucking abject failure. Same token, if you're trying to gain weight, thinking you're going to put on like 20 kilos of mass in 12 weeks of smashing D-ball and train and SUST, it's not sustainable. You need to do things that are sustainable and you're actually going to train with in a long time. Gaining muscle, regardless if you're taking steroids or not, is a long-term process. It's years and decades, not weeks and months. Weight loss, it's more of like a month to year thing, depending on the amount you want to lose. But however, if you are someone that, like I would be more of the kind of person that would habituate to overeating and putting on weight. If you're someone who has those tendencies to kind of rewire the way you think or to change your habits, to change your lifestyle, it's a lifelong thing if you want to stick with it. So you gotta think long term. If you think short term, it's going to fail on a long term trend. You need to think consistency, sustainability, something that works for your situation, your personality, your lifestyle, because anything else is going to be it might be a short term success, but long term, it's not going to be a success unless it's these things. That means you got to plan your meals. You've got to pre-cook. You got to meal prep. You've got to order meal preps. You need to order ready meals. You need to do what you got to do in your situation, in what, like your finances, what's feasible, your schedule, what's feasible, where you live, what's feasible, what's your working conditions, what's feasible. It needs to be feasible, but you need to work out what that is and then plan for that. Plan for that situation. Plan for the situation you're in, not the situation you want to be in, because that's just fucking dumb. You need to set a meal structure. So that means eating at the same times every day. So get out of bed at the same time, eat your breakfast at the same time, have your first snack at the same time, have lunch at the same time, have the next snack at the same time, train at the same time, have your post meal at the same time. Just set it and fucking do it. That's what you got to do. There are certain habitual things that are good to do around here. So like eating at a table rather than eating. So if you're at work, for instance, actually taking time to go and eat your lunch rather than eating it at the desk is gonna make you more cognizant of what you're doing. So you're gonna be more accurate when someone asks you, what have you eaten today? You're gonna be a lot more accurate in recalling what you've eaten today if you've taken time out of your day to actually do it. It's also better for your stress levels to do it that way, and you're much less likely to snack if you do it that way. So actually taking time out of your day, and even better to eat with other people, make it a social thing, is even better. Although at the minute, not really that fucking feasible. Thanks, coronavirus. Make it part of your routine. I structure my day around how I eat, and I have ever since I started with this bullshit when I was like 18, 19. I've just done it since. So I structure my day around my meals. Times when I've been more lax and haven't done that, I get fat. Simple. It's literally just something as Billy basic as having a meal plan and having meal times is going to go a really fucking long way to helping with you succeeding. As much as you can, if you're trying to lose weight, eliminate snacking, or at least eliminate unplanned snacking. You can plan snacks, that's fine. If you want to eat more regularly through the day, that's grand. You just got to make sure that your calories line up with what you're trying to do. And again, the reverse for gaining weight. If you want to gain weight, bring in snacking, bring in unplanned snacking. If you're trying to train for performance, it's something you can utilize. Maybe you've undereaten and your energy's flagging during a session. Just fucking have a protein bar or have a chocolate bar or have something. Kind of self-adjust that way. Plan your weekly meals, plan your breakfasts, plan your lunches, plan your dinners. Grocery shop for that. Don't ban any kind of types of food. Don't ban carbs. Don't do low carb. Don't do low fat. That's all bullshit. Don't, like, if you want to have a fucking burger, have a burger. If you want to have a curry, have a curry. If you want to have a chocolate bar, have a chocolate bar. Just plan for it. Have it within your calories. You can eat what you want realistically as long as you're hitting your calorie targets. You can pretty much do whatever the fuck you want to do. It doesn't. it might not be the healthiest thing in the world, but not having structure that works for you, not exercising, not understanding what nutrition is, not understanding what calories are, not having a structure to it is way less fucking healthy than having a curry or having a pizza or having, like, you can have shit food, it's fine. It doesn't matter. There is no such thing as shit food. You can eat what you want, just as long as there's a plan to it, as long as you have an understanding of what you're trying to achieve and there's a structure around it. I definitely think you should give yourself freedom within the week to go off plan. So, for example, if it's a Wednesday and you're training and you've got your planned dinner and your trainer partner's like, let's go get a McDonald's, just go and get the fucking McDonald's. Just don't have the meal. Maybe freeze the meal you're going to make and have it next week. Just have backups, have contingencies, which we'll talk about. But there should be flexibility built into your week. You shouldn't be saying no to social engagements because I'm trying to lose weight or I'm trying to gain weight, so I can't go there because I'm not going to be able to eat food. Just build it into your week, build it into your month. Have backups, have action, reaction. Yeah. The same token, like if you're trying to lose weight, you can't be going out fucking eating McDonald's 5 days a week and get pissed 5 days a week. But you can't really live your life like that. I mean, I've tried. It's fun. Set yourself up to succeed. That's the main thing. Is you gotta bat your own corner. You can't try and be overly restrictive. You can't set up an unrealistic target. You can't put too much pressure on yourself. You've got to work with yourself, and you've got to try and set yourself up to win rather than to fail. That means your environment needs to line up with your target. So if you're trying to lose weight, having a whole bunch of snack food lying around, having chocolate in the house, having lots of like Rustler's burgers, like having all that crap easy to hand is a terrible idea. Get rid of it, chuck it out of your house. One of the best things you can do when you're trying to diet or trying to lose weight is to make it so you actually have to order out. So you need to get it delivered, you need to go collect it, or you need to go to the shop if you want to eat high calorie foods. Honestly, just a small barrier to entry, like loading up the Just Eat app and paying for it, actually makes a big fucking difference if you have food sitting there in the fridge. I mean, it doesn't work all the time, but it works. It works some of the time, which is better than none of the time. Same token, if you're trying to gain weight, just have loads of snack food on hand, and just fucking every time you go to the kitchen, have a fucking snack bar or something, or have a protein bar, or just sit like. It's up to you how you do it, but if you're trying to gain weight, you want to set up an environment that's going to help you gain weight. The same way, if you're trying to lose weight, you want to set up an environment that's going to help you lose weight. Set your meal plan around your day so it's easy. Make it work for your schedule. Use it to break up your day, and have a structure that's like motivating. So you can use it to break up the work day. So if you're working like a 12-hour shift or some shit, if you have like good meals, so I know at like 12 I'm going to get to eat this, I know at 4 I'm going to get to eat this, and I know before I go, or when I get home, I'm going to get to eat this. You can use it as like cards through the day to help with motivation, and you've got to have flexibility built into your approach. I think that's super important. You need a structure, you need a plan, but without flexibility, it's going to break. And then something to talk about is like having backup options and preempting failure. Regardless of who you are, you're not going to stick to plan 24/7. It's not going to happen. So you need to know what you're going to do in the moment when something goes awry. So an example I've got here, I've got a really busy Tuesday. I might miss breakfast. In the case that I do meet breakfast, what am I going to do in that scenario? Maybe there's a shop on the way, and I can grab some sushi and some water, and that's going to hit around my targets as regards calories for that meal. Or in another scenario, like we spoke around before, maybe there's a social opportunity that happens, and you want to go and take advantage of it. Maybe you want to go have a few beers, eat some shit, just enjoy yourself. Cool, do it. But what are you going to change in the next day's plan, the next few days' plan, to make up for that, to make sure that you're on target? The opposite again. Maybe your friends want to go to the bar and maybe you can't get any food in, so you're down on calories that day. What are you going to do when you get home? What are you going to do the next day to try and make up what you missed potentially if you're trying to gain size, gain weight? And again, if you slip up, have a bad day, week, month, year, don't dwell on it. Practice some visualization, practice some preempting, practice some cueing. Let's say you use a mental exercise, right? I completely fall off the wagon for a month, and my motivation's gone. I don't want to do it anymore. What am I going to do on a daily basis to try and start trending right? Maybe you're in your thought experiment. You're like, right, I've been really down. I just can't bring myself to be on full plan. So what I'm going to do when I feel like I want to start getting back into it, maybe I'm just going to weigh myself in the morning as part of my habit. And that's what I'm going to do. Or maybe I'm going to have a healthy breakfast. Or just what are the strategies? What are the tactics that you're going to try and utilize in a situation where you're maybe trending in the wrong direction to try and bring it around to the right way? And then what's the progression from that? Okay, so I've started weighing myself every morning and I'm seeing the scale weight and I'm thinking, okay, I maybe want to do something about this. What's the next stage? What am I going to do? Am I going to set meal times? Am I going to just eat the same stuff? Like, it's got to be something that works for you, but you got to have tactics, and you've got to have like, if you've already thought about this scenario and actions you're going to take in that scenario, when you're in the scenario, when it happens, you're much more likely to be able to get out of it or to start trending in the right direction. Then if you haven't, you're less likely to kind of get lost if you've done this. So part of this whole process is preempting these things and having tactics and backups for when these things inevitably happen, because they will happen. Okay, I think that's the last slide. So that's the first chat on calorie intake and habits. So hopefully this is useful. In the next slide, we're probably going to cover macro and micronutrients, and then we'll probably maybe do one on supplements and kind of just general shit. Okay, hope you found it useful. I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.